Owen had been living alone in the mountains of Kepler 442b for 3 years now. He was a retired military veteran, a man who had spent most of his life fighting wars on distant planets. Now, at 52 years old, he just wanted peace and quiet. The mountains gave him that. They were cold, rocky, and far away from the noise of the human colonies below. One morning, Owen woke up early like he always did. The sun was rising over the peaks, painting the sky orange and pink. He made some coffee on his small stove and sat outside his cabin, watching the landscape. He had a routine now. Every day he would walk through the mountains, check his supply stores, and make sure no poachers were in the area. Poachers were common on this planet. They hunted rare creatures and sold them to rich people off-world. Owen hated them. He had seen too much violence in his life, and now he tried to protect what little wilderness remained. That particular morning something felt different. Owen could not explain it, but his military instincts told him something was wrong. He finished his coffee, put on his heavy coat, and grabbed his scanner. The scanner was an old device from his military days. It could detect heat signatures and movement from far away. He had brought it with him when he retired, a habit he could not break. Owen walked for 2 hours through the mountain paths. The air was thin and cold. His breath came out in small white clouds. He was looking for any sign of poachers or illegal activity. That was when he heard it, a sound so faint that most people would have missed it. It was a low humming noise coming from somewhere deep in the mountain. Owen followed the sound. It led him down into a narrow canyon, and then to the entrance of a cave he had never seen before. The mouth of the cave was hidden behind large rocks and thick vines. No wonder he had never noticed it. The humming sound was louder now. Owen turned on his scanner and stepped inside the cave carefully. The cave was dark, but Owen's eyes adjusted quickly. His military training had taught him to move quietly and stay alert. The humming sound grew louder as he went deeper into the cave. Then, suddenly he saw them. His breath stopped. He could not believe what he was looking at. There, on the floor of the cave, were eggs. Massive eggs. They were as tall as a man and as wide as barrels. They were covered in hard, shiny skin that looked like scales. The eggs glowed with a soft, blue light. The humming sound was coming from them. Owen had read about dragons in the old colony records, but he had never believed they were real. Nobody had seen one in over 100 years. Yet here they were, at least 20 of them, lying in the cave like precious jewels. Owen walked closer, his heart beating fast. He had to be careful. If these were dragons, they could be dangerous. But there was no sound of movement, no sign of adult dragons protecting the eggs. The cave appeared empty except for the eggs. Owen moved slowly between them, studying each one carefully. Most of them looked healthy, glowing bright and warm. But one of them off to the side looked different. Its glow was weak and flickering. There were cracks running across its shell. Owen knelt down next to the damaged egg. He could feel heat coming from it, but something was wrong. The egg was failing. He did not know how he knew this, but he was certain. This egg needed help. Without thinking much about it, Owen reached out and touched the egg gently. It was warm like living skin. He felt something inside, something alive and struggling. Then Owen heard voices. Human voices. They were coming from outside the cave, getting closer. Owen's military instincts kicked in immediately. He knew those voices. They belonged to poachers. He had heard them before in the lower colonies. These were the bad ones, the ones who used violence and did not care about the creatures they hunted. They were probably here for the eggs. Dragon eggs were worth millions on the black market. Rich collectors paid enormous sums for them. Owen made a decision in that moment. He did not have time to think about it carefully. His instincts told him what to do. He could not let these men take the eggs. He could not let them destroy this miraculous discovery. And he especially could not let them harm the weak egg that was struggling to live. Owen carefully lifted the damaged egg. It was heavy, much heavier than he expected, but he was strong from years of military work. He tucked the egg under his arm like a precious child. Then he moved quietly toward the back of the cave. He remembered from his cave exploration work in the military that caves often had multiple exits. He had to find another way out before the poachers entered the main entrance. The voices outside were louder now. Owen could hear them clearly. They were laughing about how much money they would make. They had no idea that a retired military man was inside the cave, protecting what they wanted to steal. Owen found a narrow passage at the back of the cave. He squeezed through it, still holding the egg carefully. The passage led upward, climbing higher into the mountain. Behind him, he heard the poachers enter the main cave. They shouted when they saw the eggs. Owen moved faster, climbing higher, getting away from them. After what felt like hours, Owen emerged on the other side of the mountain. He was exhausted and sweating even in the cold air. The egg he was carrying had stopped humming. For a terrible moment Owen thought it might be dead. But then very faintly he felt it warming up again. The creature inside was still alive. Owen looked back at the mountain. He knew the poachers would search for the missing egg. He knew they would come after him. But as he held the egg close to his chest, feeling its weak heartbeat, Owen made another decision. He would protect this creature. He would keep it safe no matter what it took. After all his years of violence and war, maybe this was what he was meant to do. Maybe saving one innocent life was more important than anything else he had ever done in his long and difficult life. Owen carried the dragon egg back to his cabin. The journey took him most of the day. He had to move carefully and quietly, always listening for sounds of pursuit. The egg felt heavier with each step, but Owen did not stop. He knew the poachers would search for him. They would not give up easily. An egg worth millions of credits would drive men to do terrible things. When Owen finally reached his cabin, the sun was setting. The sky was turning dark purple and orange. He was tired and his muscles ached, but he did not rest. Instead, he carefully placed the egg inside the cabin, in the warmest corner he could find. He wrapped it in blankets and old clothes to keep it protected and warm. The egg's glow was still very weak. Owen was worried it might not survive. He spent the entire first night awake watching the egg. He sat beside it, checking its temperature every few minutes. He had learned some basic biology during his military service, and he remembered that eggs needed heat and care to develop properly. The cabin was cold, so Owen kept a small fire burning in his stove. He added wood regularly to keep the temperature steady and warm. By morning, the egg's glow had become a little brighter. Owen felt relieved. Maybe the creature inside was getting stronger. He made some food and ate quickly, but he did not leave the egg alone. Over the next few days, Owen developed a routine. He would wake up early, check the egg, make sure it was warm enough, and then do small tasks around the cabin while keeping watch. But Owen knew danger was coming. The poachers would not forget about the missing egg. They would search the mountains systematically. They would ask questions in the colonies. They would probably find his cabin eventually. So Owen prepared for battle. His military training took over. He began setting up defenses around the cabin. He placed sensors on the mountain paths that would alert him if anyone was approaching. These were old military devices he had brought from his service days. They were simple but effective. He also arranged rocks and logs around the cabin to create obstacles. An attacker would have a harder time moving quickly through the area. He dug shallow trenches and covered them with branches and snow. These would slow down anyone trying to reach the cabin on foot. Owen also checked his weapons. He had some old military equipment stored away, guns and ammunition that he had kept just in case he ever needed them. He had hoped he would never use them again, but now he prepared them carefully. He cleaned each weapon, checked that they worked properly, and stored ammunition in easy-to-reach places around the cabin. He set up firing positions at different windows and angles. If attackers came, they would find a soldier ready for them, not an old man living alone in the mountains. For 2 weeks, Owen lived in a state of constant alertness. He barely slept. He watched the egg during the day and maintained his defenses at night. The egg grew stronger, its glow becoming brighter each day. Owen spoke to it sometimes, telling it stories about his life, about the wars he had fought, about why he had come to this lonely mountain. He did not know if the creature inside could hear him, but it felt right to talk to it. Then one night Owen heard something. His sensors had picked up movement on the mountain path below his cabin. Multiple people were coming up the slope. Owen's heart began to beat faster. This was it. The poachers had found him. Owen quickly moved the egg to a hidden corner of the cabin, burying it under more blankets and old equipment. Then he took his position at the window, his rifle ready. He could see shadows moving through the trees. There were at least 5 men, maybe more. They were carrying weapons and lights. They moved like soldiers, which meant they were serious and dangerous. The men spread out and surrounded the cabin. Owen recognized one of them. It was Victor, a known poacher and criminal. Victor had killed people before. Owen had heard stories about him in the colonies. This was not going to be a simple negotiation. Victor called out to Owen. He said he knew Owen had taken something that belonged to them. He said if Owen gave back the egg, they would leave him alone. They would forget this ever happened. Owen knew this was a lie. Men like Victor did not leave witnesses. If Owen gave them the egg, they would probably kill him and burn down the cabin to cover their tracks. Owen did not answer. Instead, he fired a warning shot through the window. The bullet hit the ground near Victor's feet, sending up snow and dirt. The poachers immediately returned fire. Bullets struck the cabin walls and windows. Owen stayed calm and returned fire carefully. He aimed at their positions, not trying to kill them, just keeping them away from the cabin. The battle lasted for hours. Owen's military experience gave him an advantage. He had better defensive positions, better knowledge of the terrain, and better control of his emotions. The poachers were angry and desperate, but they were not as disciplined as soldiers. They wasted ammunition and made mistakes. As the night went on, the poachers realized they could not take the cabin easily. They would have to call for help or try a different approach. Around dawn, they retreated down the mountain, carrying their wounded. Victor shouted threats as they left, promising he would return with more men. Owen stayed alert. He knew they would be back. But for now the egg was safe. Owen checked on it immediately. It was glowing brighter than ever. He felt certain that the creature inside was getting close to hatching. Owen was exhausted, his body aching from the stress and fighting. But he could not rest. The poachers would return and he had to be ready. He cleaned his weapons again, checked his ammunition supplies, and made sure all his defenses were working properly. Then he sat beside the egg and waited. The vigil continued. Owen had become a protector now and he would not fail. Owen had been awake for almost 36 hours straight. His body was exhausted, but his mind remained sharp and alert. The battle with the poachers had left him wounded. A bullet had grazed his shoulder, and another had cut deeply into his left side. He had wrapped the wounds with cloth and medical tape, but they hurt badly. Blood was seeping through the bandages slowly. Owen knew he needed real medical help, but there was no one to call. He could not leave the egg and he could not let anyone know where he was. The egg was changing. Over the past few hours, its glow had become extremely bright. The soft blue light now filled the entire cabin, casting strange shadows on the walls. The humming sound that had been quiet for weeks was growing louder and stronger. Owen recognized the signs. The creature inside was ready to come out. The hatching was beginning. Owen sat beside the egg, watching it carefully. He had moved it to a safer place in the cabin, away from the windows and doors. He had also prepared blankets and warm water, though he was not sure what a newborn dragon would need. He was making this up as he went along, using common sense and his basic knowledge of animal care. Around midnight the egg started to shake. Not a gentle movement, but violent shaking. Cracks began to appear across the hard shell. The cracks grew larger and deeper. Owen could hear something moving inside, pushing against the shell. The creature inside was struggling to break free. Owen wanted to help, but he knew from his military biology training that he should not interfere. The creature needed to break out on its own. That struggle would give it strength. The shaking became more intense. Pieces of shell began falling away. Owen could see something moving inside, something dark and wet. The creature was pushing harder and harder against its prison. The humming sound became louder, almost like a song. Owen felt goosebumps on his arms. He was witnessing something miraculous, something that had not happened on this planet in over 100 years. Then suddenly, a head emerged from the broken shell. It was small, covered in wet scales that glistened in the blue light. The creature had large eyes, bright and intelligent. Its mouth opened, and it released a sound so loud and powerful that Owen covered his ears. It was not a scream exactly, but a call. A cry that echoed through the cabin and seemed to shake the mountains themselves. The young dragon pulled itself completely free from the egg. It was small, maybe the size of a large dog, with 4 legs and 2 wings that were still wet and folded against its body. Its scales were a beautiful silver color, shimmering in its own light. The dragon looked around the cabin with wonder, its eyes moving from one thing to another. Then it looked directly at Owen. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Owen held his breath. The dragon was a wild creature, born just moments ago. Could be dangerous. But there was something in the dragon's eyes that Owen recognized. Awareness. Intelligence. The creature was not just a beast operating on pure instinct. It was thinking, understanding, experiencing the world for the first time. The young dragon took a few unsteady steps toward Owen. Its legs were shaky and wet. It almost fell, but it kept moving forward. Owen stayed perfectly still, not wanting to frighten the newborn creature. The dragon came close to him, sniffing him with its nose. Then, incredibly, it made a soft chirping sound and rubbed its head against Owen's chest, right where his heart was beating. Owen felt tears coming to his eyes. He carefully reached out and touched the dragon's head. The scales were warm and smooth, not slimy like he had expected. The dragon made more soft sounds, almost like purring. It seemed to understand that Owen had saved it, that he had protected it when it was helpless. Then the dragon's head suddenly jerked up. Its eyes went wide and it made a different sound now. Not the soft purring, but a sharp, piercing cry that was full of alarm. The young dragon ran to the window and looked out into the dark night. It cried out again, louder this time. Owen's military instincts kicked in immediately. Something was wrong. He moved to the window and looked outside. At first he saw nothing but darkness and snow. But then he heard them. More voices. The poachers had returned and they had brought reinforcements. Owen could see at least 10 men moving through the trees carrying more weapons than before. The young dragon cried out again, and this time, Owen heard something that made his blood run cold. In the distance, far away in the mountains, there were other cries. Different cries. Larger cries. They were answering the call of the young dragon. Other dragons were responding. Owen understood what was happening. The young dragon had called to its family. The other dragons, wherever they had been hiding on this planet, had heard the call of the newborn. They were coming to help. The poachers heard the distant cries too. Owen could see them stop in their tracks. They looked confused and frightened. They knew now that they were not just dealing with one old man and an egg. There were dragons coming. Real live dragons. Owen quickly grabbed his weapons and checked that they were loaded. But he knew now that this battle would be different. He would not be fighting alone anymore. The young dragon, barely minutes old, had already summoned help. The creature had recognized its new protector and called out to its own kind. Owen looked at the young dragon and said quietly, "Your family is coming. We are going to be okay now." The dragon made soft sounds and stayed close to Owen, watching the window as the distant cries grew louder and closer. The vigil was ending. Something new was beginning. The sky above the mountains exploded with movement. Massive shapes flew through the air, silhouetted against the moonlight. The dragons had arrived. Owen watched through the cabin window as 3 enormous creatures descended toward his position. They were nothing like the young dragon. These were adults, powerful and magnificent. Their wings stretched wide, blocking out the stars. Their bodies were covered in scales that reflected the moonlight like armor. The poachers panicked. They fired their weapons at the sky, but the bullets seemed meaningless against creatures so large and strong. The lead dragon, a massive creature with deep blue scales, released a roar that shook the entire mountain. Snow fell from the trees. The ground trembled beneath Owen's feet. The poachers screamed and ran down the mountain as fast as they could, abandoning their weapons and equipment. Within minutes, the poachers had disappeared into the darkness. They were gone, fleeing in terror. Owen realized that Victor and his men would not be coming back. No amount of money was worth facing creatures like these. The dragons landed around the cabin. The young dragon inside made excited chirping sounds and ran toward the door. Owen opened it carefully, and the small dragon rushed outside. It ran directly to the largest dragon, the one with the deep blue scales. The adult dragon lowered its massive head and made gentle humming sounds. The young dragon climbed onto the adult's neck, making happy sounds. Owen stepped outside slowly, his hands visible and open. His military training told him to be cautious around wild creatures, but something inside him felt calm. These dragons were not attacking him. They seemed to understand that he had protected the young one. The largest dragon, which Owen somehow knew was the mother, turned its head toward him and made a low rumbling sound. Owen did not run or hide. He stood his ground and looked directly at the dragon's eyes. Those eyes were ancient and intelligent. They contained more wisdom than Owen had seen in any human being. The mother dragon studied him for a long moment, and Owen felt like she could see everything about him. She could see his pain, his loneliness, his years of violence, and his choice to protect her child. The mother dragon took a step toward Owen. Her massive claw, which was the size of his entire body, came down gently in front of him. It was not a threatening gesture. It was an invitation. Owen, without fully understanding why he was doing it, reached out and touched the dragon's claw. The scales were warm and firm, covered in a thin layer of what looked like frost. A second dragon, smaller than the mother but still enormous, approached Owen carefully. This one had silver scales like the young dragon. Owen somehow knew this was the father. The father dragon made a different sound, a kind of musical note that seemed to say something Owen could almost understand. The message was clear without words. "Thank you. Thank you for saving our child." Owen's wounds were burning with pain. Blood was still seeping through his bandages. His body was exhausted beyond anything he had experienced even during his military service. He felt like he might collapse at any moment. The mother dragon seemed to notice this. She made a soft, concerned sound and lowered her head further. What happened next was something Owen would never forget for the rest of his life. The mother dragon opened her mouth, and from inside came a strange liquid that looked almost like liquid gold. The dragon carefully applied this substance to Owen's wounds. It did not hurt. Instead, it felt warm and soothing, like healing itself was flowing into his body. As the golden liquid touched his skin, Owen's pain began to disappear. His wounds, which had been deep and serious, started to close up. The bleeding stopped. The torn flesh seemed to repair itself. Within minutes, Owen's injuries were healed completely. He looked down at his side and shoulder in amazement. The wounds were gone, leaving only faint scars. Owen looked up at the mother dragon with wonder. She made another low sound, and Owen could swear she was showing him something like a smile. The father dragon made that musical sound again, and the young dragon danced around Owen in circles, making happy chirping noises. Over the following days, Owen's relationship with the dragons grew stronger and deeper. They did not leave. The mother, father, and young dragon stayed in the area around his cabin. They seemed to understand that Owen was their protector now, and they had chosen to become his protectors in return. Owen learned the dragons' names through simple observation and communication. The young dragon that he had saved was called Aiden. The mother was Vera and the father was Grayson. These names came to Owen somehow, not through words but through understanding. It was as if the dragons were sharing pieces of themselves with him, allowing him to know them on a deeper level. Vera and Grayson brought Owen food, hunting creatures from the mountains and leaving portions for him. They were intelligent enough to understand that he could not survive on his own. They also protected him constantly. When storms came, they sheltered him under their wings. When strange sounds echoed through the mountains at night, they stayed alert, watching for any threat. The colonial government, meanwhile, had become confused. They sent messages asking about the unusual activity in the mountains. Reports were coming in about creatures flying through the sky. Military helicopters had tried to investigate but turned back when they spotted the dragons. Fear and uncertainty spread through the colonies. Nobody knew what was happening in the remote mountain region. Owen made a decision. He knew that eventually he would have to face the government. He would have to explain what had happened and what he had discovered. But not yet. For now, he wanted to learn more about the dragons. He wanted to understand them better. He wanted to know if true peace between humans and dragons was possible. Vera, Grayson, and Aiden seemed to want the same thing. They stayed with Owen, teaching him their language through sounds and gestures. Owen taught them about human tools and structures. A bond was forming, stronger than anything Owen had experienced in his long life. For the first time in many years, he felt like he was part of a family. 3 months had passed since Owen first held the dragon egg in his cabin. The mountains had become a sanctuary for both humans and dragons, though the humans did not yet know it. Owen had made contact with the colonial government, but he did it carefully. He sent messages explaining that he had discovered an intelligent species living in the mountains. He asked for peace and protection for the dragons. He promised to serve as a bridge between the two civilizations. The government did not believe him at first. They sent scientists and military officers to investigate. Owen brought them to a clearing where Vera, Grayson, and Aiden waited. When the officials saw the dragons with their own eyes, everything changed. The scientists realized immediately that these were not mindless animals. The dragons communicated with each other using complex sounds and gestures. They showed problem-solving abilities and emotional intelligence. Some of the older scientists wept, saying they were witnessing the most important discovery in human history. The military officers were nervous and wanted to capture the dragons for study. Owen refused. He stood between the dragons and the soldiers, putting his life on the line. He explained that the dragons were people just like humans were people. They had families, intelligence, and feelings. They deserved respect and freedom, not captivity and experimentation. Vera and Grayson did not attack or show aggression. Instead, they seemed to understand what Owen was doing. They remained calm and peaceful. Young Aiden did something extraordinary that changed everything. The dragon, now several months old and much larger, walked directly toward the soldiers who had their weapons drawn. Aiden moved slowly and carefully, showing no signs of fear or hostility. The soldiers tensed, ready to fire if the dragon attacked. But Aiden simply stood in front of them, looking into their eyes with intelligence and sadness. The young dragon seemed to be asking a simple question. Did they understand? Could they see that he was not a monster? One of the younger soldiers, a woman named Elizabeth, lowered her weapon. She reached out slowly and touched Aiden's neck. The dragon made a soft sound, almost like purring. Elizabeth began to cry. Other soldiers lowered their weapons as well. The moment of potential violence passed. Something deeper had happened. Human and dragon had made a connection. The colonial government, after much debate, decided to establish formal relations with the dragons. They created new laws protecting dragon habitats and making it illegal to hunt or capture them. The government also appointed Owen as the official representative of the dragon species. He would serve as translator and ambassador between the two civilizations. Owen accepted the responsibility without hesitation. Owen established the Mountain Sanctuary, a protected area where dragons could live safely. The government provided funding and resources. Owen worked with scientists to study the dragons and learn their language more deeply. He also taught the dragons about human technology and customs. Communication between the species improved every day. But not everyone was happy about this new peace. There were people in the colonies who wanted to exploit the dragons for profit and power. A rogue faction made up of wealthy businessmen and corrupt military officers decided to eliminate Owen. If they could kill him, they believed they could convince the government that peace with the dragons was impossible. They could then push for war and subjugation of the dragon species. The assassination attempt came on a quiet afternoon. Owen was walking near the mountain sanctuary when he heard gunshots. Bullets pierced the air around him. Owen ran toward the trees trying to reach cover. He knew the sanctuary was nearby. If he could reach Vera and Grayson, he would be safe. But before Owen could reach the dragons, something incredible happened. Aiden, who had been resting on a rocky ledge above, saw the danger. The young dragon, now fully grown and powerful, launched himself into the air. He flew directly between Owen and the assassins. The dragon positioned his body to shield Owen from the gunfire. Bullets struck Aiden's scales, bouncing off harmlessly. The young dragon roared with a fury that shook the mountains. Vera and Grayson erupted from the sanctuary, their massive forms blocking out the sun. The assassins, faced with 3 angry dragons, ran for their lives. They did not stop running until they reached the colonies. Owen rushed to Aiden, checking the dragon for injuries. The bullets had left marks on Aiden's scales, but he was not seriously hurt. Owen embraced the young dragon, tears streaming down his face. Aiden had sacrificed himself to protect Owen. The dragon had placed Owen's life above his own safety. It was an act of love and loyalty that no human words could describe. The image of Aiden shielding Owen was captured by news cameras that had been filming nearby. The footage spread across all the colonies instantly. People saw a young dragon willing to die for a human. People saw a human who had dedicated his life to protecting dragons. The entire meaning of the word protection changed in that moment. Public opinion shifted dramatically. People who had been uncertain about peace with the dragons now became passionate supporters. They demanded that the rogue faction be arrested and punished. The government, emboldened by public support, strengthened the laws protecting dragons and declared the mountain sanctuary a sacred place. Owen stood on a high cliff overlooking the mountains, flanked by Vera, Grayson, and Aiden. Below them, in a protected valley, new dragon eggs lay in carefully prepared nests. These eggs had been laid by Vera, and they represented the future. A future where humans and dragons lived together in peace. A future where both species protected one another. Owen placed his hand on Aiden's neck, feeling the steady pulse of the dragon's heartbeat. He had come to this planet as a broken veteran, a man haunted by the violence of war. He had expected to live out his remaining years in solitude and silence. Instead, he had found purpose. He had found family. He had found redemption through protection. The dragons made soft sounds around him, and Owen understood their meaning. They were saying thank you. They were saying welcome to the family. They were saying that humans and dragons were no longer separate species. They were protectors together, guardians of each other and of the beautiful world they shared. Owen smiled, feeling peace settle into his soul for the first time in his entire life.